Christine. Okay, we're live, please. We're live, we're live, we're live. I want to say welcome to our friends on YouTube and Facebook Live around the world. We're grateful that you have joined us for this very, very important topic conversation that we're about to have. Today, we as a church have always take on the issues that sometimes other churches are afraid to take on, and we recognize the importance of mental issues, particularly during this pandemic and what we've all experienced and gone through. And so we want to talk about it this afternoon, and we have two great guests who have come to kind of just impart to us, to give us wisdom, understanding, and to help us with some coping skills of how we can be adaptive in this time in which we are experiencing. So thank you so much for joining us. I want to welcome Dr. Felipe to here today. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
A PhD in the area of psychology, and we are grateful. And one of our own young people from this church who have gone on to do exceptionally well professionally, Sir Andrew Rich Areas. We are so grateful to have them. And without much further ado, we're going to pray, and we're going to turn over to them so we can maximize our time here together. Gracious God, we honor you, we bless your name. We are so fortunate that we can participate with you. God, we are your people, and we recognize that you have given us, as Colossians says, you have made all things for us. So we thank you for the gift of expertise in mental health and coping skills and knowledge that you have come now to impart to us. May we around the world, as we hear these two presenters, be mindful that you have already given us the wisdom to listen, to learn, but also to put in action that which we are about to be imparted to us. So thank you for those joining us. May this be a time of refreshing, but also a time of imparting wisdom. This we ask in Christ's name. God's people around the world say amen. And anyway, without further ado, we can turn over to her, and then you're going to run things. Thank you so much.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So blessed to be here today. As Pastor Neil said, my name is Angela Reese Aris. I am a licensed social worker in the state of New York. I provide psychotherapy to children, adolescents, and young adults. And I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Philippe. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Dr. Philippe. I have a PhD in clinical psychology. I also have a license in mental health counseling. I've been doing this for quite some time. I've worked with Ms. Harris for quite a while. I work with children, adolescents, adults, a wide range of populations, wide range of diagnoses, and I'm here. Please, whatever you do today, please ask as many questions as you want. Okay, so thank you. I'm glad to be here.
All right, so we wanted to, like Dr. Philippe said, allow for plenty of questions. And I have a small slideshow just to guide our conversation, and we can get started. Okay, so today I would hope for everyone to be able to have a working definition as well as an improved understanding of what mental health is, how to recognize concerns in yourself as in with other people around you, and then have ideas and places to go to access help for yourself as well as others. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so what is mental health? So when you hear mental health, and I want you guys to talk back to us a little bit, what do you think of when you hear the word mental health? And you guys can just kind of call out your ideas. Crazy, okay. Any other ideas with the word mental health? Yes. Overstressed. Anyone from the back? Depressed, yes. Unstable. So there's a lot of negative connotation when we hear the word mental health, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So mental health, however, talks about your brain health in just a very non-judgmental, non-stigmatized definition. We think about mental health as the health of your brain, which includes what you think, what you feel, how you connect to others, as well as your psychological functioning, which Dr. Philippe can speak more to in a minute.
I think also we have to look at cultural issues as well. So think of mental health from a cultural perspective. Someone from this side of the world versus someone from the Caribbean Africa, or anywhere might see mental health differently. Like you said, there's a lot of negative connotations when we hear the word mental health. One thing we have to think about is emotional health as well.
Yes.
Emotional health is critical. So when I think of mental health, the first thing I think about is what are the things that are affecting your life on a day-to-day basis, and how are those things impacting on various aspects of your life, which can include parenting, your academics, your work, your relationships with other people. If those things are beginning to affect your day-to-day functioning, now you have a mental health concern.
Right, and so in the traditional idea, people think of mental health as like depression, which is actually a mental illness and a diagnosis. So you can have a mental health concern, as Dr. Philippe was just describing, if you've been laid off your job, you don't have finances to meet the needs of your lifestyle, your kids may be stressing you out, or family members are passing, so you feel sad and may have a season of feeling depressed, as in extra sad, grieving, and things like that. However, that does not mean that you have depression in the clinical sense. In order to receive a clinical diagnosis, you would have to receive that from a doctor or a psychiatrist. And that means that these symptoms that you're feeling, or these emotions you're feeling, have extended past the stresses in your life. So it starts to impact the way that you eat, and it starts to impact the way that you sleep over months and even years of time.
Right. And those symptoms sometimes are time-based. If you have those symptoms for a certain amount of time. One question, has anyone ever thought about a mental health crisis? A mental health crisis? Something happens that somehow interrupts your life abruptly. Whether it's psychological, emotional, behavioral, it interrupts your life just abruptly. Whether it's yourself, a family member, all of those things are considered mental health issues.
Right, and so that's all a part of your mental health in a very big and broad sense. So what I want you guys to take away from this conversation, though, is being able to pay attention to your mental health in the same way you pay attention to your physical health. So if you have a chest pain, where do you go? Right, you go to the doctor. If you have a foot pain, who would you see? A podiatrist. So if you're having pain with your emotions, where would you go? Right, a therapist. Not because you are now diagnosed with depression or a schizophrenia, or all these other big elaborate words that are very, very serious mental illnesses, just because you're feeling a pain with that part of your health, your emotional health. Any questions on that part? Yes. Okay, hold on. That was a really good question. So they're bringing you a mic so everyone can hear.
You have to arrange your questions so quick because the majority of the audience is on social media. People are watching on social media. They can't hear you when you speak like that. So you have to organize questions at the end of it, after your presentation, you have to come with the mic and have one your question.
Okay.
Do it both ways. It's not good for social media.
Okay, no problem. Yes.
So that it's just too much. It doesn't do well
On social media. Okay, no problem. So we're going to continue through the presentation. If you have questions, please write them down because there are people watching live. So we're going to leave time at the end to allow for questions from everyone and answer these types of questions. So we'll go to the next topic. The next slide, please. Okay, so this is just a picture of what we just talked about, which is how mental health and wellness aligns with mental illness. So you can have a mental illness but still have a flourishing or good mental health, and you can have no mental illness but still have a languishing or suffering mental health or wellness overall. Next slide, please. All right, so these are some examples of how to access assistance for your mental wellness and how to elevate your mental wellness overall, how to take care of it. Dr. Philippe, do you want to speak to this a little bit?
No, I'm looking at the slide, so I think let's go through the slide and
freestyle after. Okay.
Yeah.
So some ways that you can benefit your overall mental health, the same way you would take care of your physical health, would be to exercise. That's something that benefits both. There are hormones that are released in your brain when you exercise that improve your mood. Some other ways include your diet, nutrition, as well as therapy, which we'll speak to where there's a stigma. But if you don't have access to therapy, for example, there's a lot of self-help tools out there on Google as well as Amazon. You can buy books from the bookstore. There are apps on your phone that you can use to track your thoughts, your feeling, your mood. Other areas include sleep, meditation, prayer, other ways of integrating your mind, body, and soul all together in improving your mood. And then, like I said before, your spirituality, religious practices, hanging out with family, friends, and broadening your community.
I'd like to emphasize on sleep health. Sleep health is critical. It affects many areas of our lives, our brain operations, everything. So please try your best to get good sleep.
You guys definitely write down your questions about that statement. Next slide, please. So just a reminder, mental wellness is how you cope with life's adversities, how you cope with those mental health crises, as Dr. Philippe said, the things that interrupt your day-to-day that then cause a change in your emotions. Mental wellness are ways that you support yourself and prevent burnout in your life. So the day-to-day activities, the day-to-day routines and schedules you put in place, whether that's what you eat, how you sleep, who you hang out with, who you spend your time with, what personal time you take for yourself. Those are all the resources you can use to prevent from having a downslide in your mental health. Improving your resilience. So resilience is basically when you face something that is adverse or a crisis, how do you bounce back from it? And the more things you face over time, the more tools you learn, the more skills you'll gain, and how you use that to then apply to the next situation. So a good example, of that is when you're at work, right, and you're dealing with someone who stresses you out or triggers anger, triggers sadness, triggers feelings of insecurity because of the things they say, the way they move, how they interact with your coworkers. Okay, so you start to take a step back and think, what can I do differently in that conversation next time? All right, I won't say too much so they can't pull from me. Okay, the next time you have to see them at the copier, you keep it real short and brief, then you leave, and you don't feel as sad from that interaction with that person. So that's an example of resilience, which is developed over time. Okay, so what it is not one thing. As I described it, and Dr. Philippe has described, it includes so many things to improve your mental wellness. The same thing with physical health. You have your brain, your heart, your arteries. Break it down into atoms and neurons and all these other things that make up your overall health. It's the same thing for your brain health. And then it's not a mental health or mental illness. Mental wellness is not a mental illness. It's literally about the physical health of your emotion and your brain.
One thing I'd like to add to what you said is to recognize those triggers. Recognize the triggers, the things in the environment, the things in people that causes you some type of distress.
Yes.
A lot of people don't know how to recognize those triggers, and that's part of mental wellness.
Right, perfect, and that's a perfect example to our next slide. We have a list of things that you can look out for as in warning signs. Sleep is a big one. Disrupted sleep or sleeping too much. Disrupted sleep could look as small as only being able to sleep a certain number of hours or having a difficulty falling asleep. Dr. Philippe, you can speak more to this.
Or staying asleep. You find yourself waking up throughout the night. Also pay attention to your dreams. What type of dreams you're having, nightmares and different types of things like that.
Right, definitely write down any questions or comments that you may have noticed in your own sleep patterns that we can speak more to at the end. Changes in your mood, whether you're finding it hard to remain happy or you don't want to remain happy, like, oh, this is too much work, I don't feel like being bothered. Your energy level, you're not sure why you're always tired, or you're not sure why you're always elated. There's nothing going on, but you feel amazing all the time, or super, super hyper.
Or someone can say, oh, you look so sad, but to yourself, you don't feel sad, because that sadness has become a day-to-day habit.
Right.
No, that's the best way I can see, but it's become your day-to-day functioning. You're living in your sadness, which is not healthy.
Activities of daily living, which is how you dress, eat, sleep, bathe, groom, daily practices that you used to do that you don't want to do, or you make sure you are on a pristine looking on the outside so that you can cover up what you feel on the inside. Hopelessness, praying and worrying, I put up here because this is an example of a thought-based worry sign. So you find that you are able, in the past, you're able to have a concern, you pray about it, you write about it, talk to one friend, and you're able to let it go.
Mm-hmm. Along with hopelessness comes helplessness.
Mm-hmm.
When you find that there's nothing you can do to help yourself to come out of a situation, that's very, very important. And when you have hopelessness and helplessness at the same time, that's critical.
Yes. And so that when you have hopelessness and helplessness at the same time, you may find that the same resources you used to use, you pray, you talk to a family member, you talk to a friend, but then you still find yourself lingering with the concern and you feel like you cannot shake it. So that's an example of how your thoughts can be a warning sign. Changes in your experiences, you don't enjoy the things you used to.
Right.
A negative self-view, like we talked about before. Self-harming behaviors, which in a traditional idea, you think of like cutting, or some people think about like head banging, or like with little kids, like they throw themselves on the floor every time they get upset. However, self-harm can also look like you have a health condition, you know what type of dietary changes or diet you're supposed to stick with, but you completely ignore it because you do not care anymore.
Right. Another one is self-medicating.
Self-medicating.
One thing we're not talking a lot about, we have not mentioned yet, is family members. A lot of us here are parents. All of these signs, it's also good to look at your children.
Right.
Because the past 2 years, remember the COVID situation has impacted multiple family members. So we have to think about that as well.
Right, and for children too, the self-harm can look a lot like staying involved in like video games and not wanting to venture out in any other interests. They don't want to go play basketball anymore. They don't want to hang out with their friends anymore. They don't want to go shopping. They have no interest in looking at clothes with you online for like the girls. They don't have any interest in getting their hair done. They don't want anything that their peers are doing. They just want to sit in their room, listen to their music, and doing the things that they feel comfort in for them. However, that is a warning sign because it's they're withdrawing from their environment and their community.
Another one is when they start to give away all of their things. That's a critical sign. Because what they're really doing is giving a gift and they're checking out, which brings up the issue of suicidality.
Yep.
So we have to think about that as well. All of these are critical, all of these are signs. What you talked about before was something called Aneedonia. When children begin to lose interest in previously enjoyed activities, that's also critical. Kids who were high functioning academically, kids who were video games, all of a sudden they don't want to play the video games anymore and they're just laying on the couch or being in their room. You got to pay close attention.
Right, so we talked about a lot of things in a very compact amount of time, so we definitely want to open up for questions and anything that is coming in through Facebook, any comments that are coming in. So let's start with your first question because that was a very, very good place to start.
Yeah.
You can repeat the question.
Yes, my question to you both is that in our communities, the stigma of not seeing mental health therapists when it's needed, how do you guys advocate that and what do you suggest that we do?
Well, one thing is what we're doing right now. The reason why I came out here is because Ms. Reese asked me to come out. One thing is to increase education around mental illness and to talk about why it's important to seek mental illness. We also have to advertise. Now, I see a lot on Facebook and social media, but it's negative advertisement. But what I'm glad to see is on TV. They're doing a lot of work with what is NYC Help and all these different avenues. So culturally too, we have to educate people from various backgrounds. You know, people integrate religion with mental health, so we have to really, really work.
And I also think that having, like Dr. Philippe said, opening up the conversation to let people know that getting help for your emotions and your brain health is just as usual as going to the dentist, going to the podiatrist, going to see a doctor. We are trained in the same type of mindset to take care of people when they're having issues. So there's no reason for you to sit home and try to figure out by yourself. You wouldn't do it for any other part of your body. And just taking off the idea that just because you seek the help doesn't mean you're going to leave with being diagnosed with a mental illness. We're literally here to give you guys the tools, and saying we, as in practicing clinicians, to give you guys tools to then take away and then flourish on in life. I tell my parents when I see kids, I don't want to see this child forever. I want to give you guys the resources, give you guys as a family what you can do the next time a issue comes up and you're noticing these things, so that you can then move forward and give it on to the next person.
Another thing too, I know for a fact many of you go to the medical doctors and they give you a questionnaire. Please be very honest when they ask you these questions about depression and anxiety and how you've been feeling for the past couple of weeks and months. It's very important. So the doctor's trying to get you help from other providers.
I have a question that's on Facebook. Someone wrote that they can only sleep for about 4 hours per day, and they're saying that it's not necessarily need about 8 hours of sleep, but they can only sleep for 4 hours. Is 4 hours okay?
4 hours a day is not recommended, but some people can function on 4 hours. But one thing you have to rule out, are there any other medical conditions that's impacting on your sleep? If they don't believe it's psychological or emotionally based, they should check with their medical doctors as well. Because 4 hours a day, well, they recommend seven hours, but 4 hours a day is really not enough for most people.
I also have another question that says, I don't feel the need to make friends. I don't want anyone around me. Is that a mental health issue or not?
Well, that's a good question. It's very hard to answer as well. Now, how long has a person been feeling like this? Have they been like this all of their lives, or is this a new phenomenon? Is this something new?
Since between 2020 to 2021, I became very withdrawn. I don't really want to be around anyone. I don't need to make new friends.
Okay.
You want it?
The first thing that comes to mind is COVID.
Yes, that was the first thing
Because
that came to my
2020.
mind.
So what happened? Is there any a major life change that happened that's caused something to happen,
Right.
or a reaction to happen?
Right, so the life change in 2020 was COVID. We were literally hearing every day, stay away from people. Not thinking about the long-term effect messaging that has. Like, what do you mean stay away from people? I love being around people. That was the hardest piece of advice to take personally. I'm not staying away from people, I'm sorry. I can't.
Okay.
So if you did take heed to those warnings, right, and you did isolate, you did stay home, you may see that shift now to feel like, oh, I don't really need to have friends. I don't really need to go interact with people. Oh, I work from home now, I'm fine. However, if you're having a question about it, that means something inside of you may be saying that it may be time to up your social interaction, to up your social support. So I would definitely see if you can speak to friends and family that you may have not, this is for the person on Facebook, if you haven't spoken to anyone, or you're having a hard time talking to people that you used to speak to in 2019 and 2018, reach back out to those friends. Go back out with that group of people. Speak to that other coworker via text message. And if you're finding it hard to get those things started, I would seek additional help.
Exactly. I agree. Also, they've told us to stay away from family members.
Yes, they did.
You know, and children, as you know, they interact with other family members, aunts, grandmothers. To hear that every day for the past 2 years has become a problem in our society. So we have to pay attention to that as well.
I have another question. Someone wants to know, they have an OCD and also PSTD, and they wonder if that's a part of mental illness. What early signs are those for mental illness?
Okay. So you mentioned OCD,
OCD.
which is an anxiety disorder, and PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
They're both disorders that can impact someone's life. Now, OCD can interrupt someone's life because you feel like you have to check things. You feel like you don't trust things. Things are dirty. I mean, OCD shows itself in different ways. But yes, those are critical issues. Post-traumatic stress disorder which is something we see a lot these days because of loss, trauma, crime, fear. There's so many things associated with PTSD. But if someone feels they have those diagnoses or symptoms, they should definitely check someone or talk to someone.
I was also going to ask, how do they know? The internet is a beautiful place, right? It's a very good resource. However, I would not self-diagnose based off of the internet.
Correct.
I would, if you have been to a physician, this is to answer the person's direct question. If you have been to the physician and you have received that diagnosis, that is a mental health diagnosis from this wonderful book called the DSM. However, if you see that you're anxious and that you're having some rituals, routines that you cannot shake, if you had a stressful period of time and you're having a response to that time and then you kind of typed it in and tried to figure it out, I would definitely get a second opinion before saying that you have those things. Oh, there's two questions in the front.
Thank you. What if you have a loved one that you notice is suffering from mental difficulties? You reach out to that person so you know that person wouldn't attend a meeting like this and refuse to see a therapist, but you see them medicating with alcohol or whatever. I mean, what can you do to help?
Well, one thing you can do is, one great thing that happened with this whole COVID situation is Tele Health. The person doesn't have to go out to a facility. You can simply tell them someone can join you by video. Someone can talk to you by phone. So that's one way to start.
I would say that if you are close to this person and they trust you, I would start with you. So maybe increasing your interaction with the person to your limit, because I know that can also be stressful when dealing with family or dealing with someone who seems to have a difficult time getting the help. However, by being a supportive person and showing that you're there for them despite their challenges can help with then easing in the conversation of other help and resources. Now, if they're being unsafe and you feel like you're worried about those types of things, there is, of course, mental health crisis hotlines. One, if everyone has out pens and paper, I will definitely spell it out. It's NYC Well. This is a 24-hour online resource. It has a text message line attached to it. You can text the crisis hotline and someone can come in the moment to help that person if they are in a crisis in the moment. And then if not, then you can also access psychologytoday.com. And if you find that they may be more beneficial to be around peers, say they don't want to see like a therapist in a professional space, there are different types of organizations that do drop-in centers. So they activities throughout the day and then infuse the mental health treatment on the back end. So maybe see if they're interested in something like that, seeing more people, getting out more, so that they can then access the help without it being so direct one-on-one. Does that answer the question?
And one more. Also, if you yourself, like Ms. Reed said, you can ask a mental health provider on how can I communicate with this person. Learn some techniques to interact with them because they do trust you. So that would be a great place to start.
I have another question. I was online. I was asked that if there wasn't a patient seeing a doctor but seeing a therapist, insurance was there, but now the therapists don't take that insurance anymore. What do you do?
Well, one thing to do is to do a search to see if there's another provider in the area. But for myself, as a provider, I would really stay with the person regardless whether I'm getting paid or not, because I would help them out until I could link them to somewhere else.
Also, you can see if they take out-of-network benefits. So, no, they don't? Okay. So if you have a therapist and your therapist no longer accepts your insurance, psychologytoday.com. You'll be surprised how many therapists actually accept the insurance you have. Now, it is very difficult to switch therapists. However, what you can ask your current is to maybe write out a full-on summary of everything that you guys have worked on up until that point, so that they can then give it to the new person. And then so that new person can pick up from where they left off.
And you'd be surprised, like you said, there's so many providers in that area, in some areas that do take the insurance. So you're not locked in. So you could do a search online and find other therapists, or they could call that insurance company and find out what other provider in their in their community.
Insurance network.
Right.
takes it. We have a question right here too.
What if the person is in the denial?
What if the
Denial state.
Okay. The question is, what if the individual is in denial and they don't want to accept that there's something wrong with them?
So, how, I guess to deepen the question, how have you talked about mental health with them before? Like, sometimes people don't like the term mental health. Some people don't like the idea of being depressed or having something wrong. However, if you talk to them in a way about the things that they actually care about and the things they actually find important, and tie in how their mental health may be impacting that, that could help them maybe ease up on the conversation. And as Dr. Philippe said before, maybe getting assistance for yourself from a therapist to then tell you how to interact with that person. So you yourself can see the therapist, since you're here, you're asking this question. You all are here, right? You can see a therapist who then deals with the issue that the person you're dealing with is dealing with, so that you can then get the tools, since they trust you as a person, to then give to that person. Because as they see, oh, you've really been helping me, the time's gonna come where they're gonna realize that you've really been helping them. Then you can ease in, oh, well, I've been talking to this person so-and-so. You don't have to say they're a therapist, you don't have to say they're a doctor, or see if there's a doctor or a therapist in their network, so they have to see a PCP. See if that person could talk to them about the concerns that you're having.
Also, culturally too, what is the source of their denial? Is it that they don't trust the mental health community? Is it that they don't trust someone who doesn't speak that language? So
someone who's not their age, someone who's not from their background, where does that kind of come from?
The person don't think anything is wrong.
So she's saying the person doesn't think anything is wrong at all. That's difficult. Well, the only thing I could say is keep trying. Keep trying. Find ways to talk to them. You might want to give them some literature, something to read. I'm sorry?
The person don't even want to hear anything about church, going to church.
Well, I understand. It could be tiring. But what I would do, I wouldn't give up on them. I would try to find a way.
Hello, I have a student. He's very angry. My question for him, he's very angry, and when I would tell him don't do X, Y, or Z, he just lay down on the floor, he rolls, he eats a lot of sugary stuff. I try to reach out to the parents, but I could never get in contact with the parent, don't mind how hard I try. What can I do to reach him?
How old is this student?
He's only 7.
So from there alone, I'm hearing a lot of factors. That's very broad. Is this child misdiagnosed, or there's a diagnosis that hasn't been caught? If you find that this issue is based on neglect, that's something else to think about. So you as a teacher, those observations need to take place. Anything else? Because if it's neglect, this is serious. If the child is throwing themselves on the floor and doing these acting out behaviors, something is wrong. They're looking for attention. There's something they want to let you know. They may not know how to say it. Now, there are other diagnoses, like children within the spectrum who hasn't been diagnosed or misdiagnosed. Those are things we have to look at. But the key issue here, from what you're telling me, you can't reach the parent. That's critical.
Okay, we're gonna kind of bring it to an end. As a pastor, let me just get to the reason why we are doing this today here, so we don't miss the mark. two things that needs to be addressed. One is the issue of loneliness,
Okay.
real issue. You have to address the issue, and the other one is depression.
Yes.
If you can address those things, then your time is going to be really. And in dealing with the issue of depression, could you talk about people using with alcohol or marijuana now as a coping mechanism? All right. So deal with the issue of loneliness and the issue of depression, and in dealing with that, you're going to talk about the issue of drugs that people are using to cope, because many members are now using drugs to cope. So talk about that, please. Then we're going to bring it to an end. All right. He's addressing your question now. All right. Yes, please. That's it.
Okay.
And they're going to be around afterwards. You can speak to them individually. All right.
Now, loneliness is very serious. This has become part of our lives for the past 2 years. I would say since COVID-19, the pandemic, again, like you said before, they told people are dangerous. You got to stay in your house. You have to isolate. You got to wear a mask. So again, we're social creatures. People are accustomed to interacting with others. They're accustomed to going to work every day. So now people have gotten comfortable also being in their homes, but not knowing what this is doing psychologically. So loneliness sets in. Now again, loneliness is very broad. People experience loneliness in different ways. The next issue the pastor brought up is the issue of drugs and alcohol. Since COVID-19, we've seen a spike in drugs across all populations: children, adolescents, adults, and seniors. So again, because they don't have access to certain areas, self-medication has become critical. Self-medicating, I should say, which includes alcohol, drugs, anything they could get their hands on. So it's a very, very broad area. And I would love to be able to open this up another time so we can discuss this more with the church.
Right, so also in terms of how to help someone who is dealing with depression and loneliness. Okay, from a church perspective, there are different ministries that are here to reach out to the community. Now, in the same way when a person goes to a doctor and they have that screening about, have you been feeling sad, have you been like all those types of questions. I think it would be a great idea if that could be integrated in a way, like, have you been feeling sad? Have not been going to work? Have you been not seeing your friends? Like, when's the last time you talked to your sister? When's the last time you talked to your pastor? When's the last time you've been to the church physical building? Oh, and then just flesh it out in a conversational way. I can provide a resource that you can have as a toolkit to then give that person if you find that they seem open and receptive to seeking professional help. However, if they are not in that position at that moment in time conversation, then follow-up is important. Why? Because when someone is feeling depressed and or lonely, they cannot see who is actually there for them. So it's going to take more than one interaction with that person for them to then set in, like, wait, this person actually cares for me. This person actually is here to support me. Because the idea of what depression and loneliness can do to the wiring of the brain, it can very much make it seem like the reality that we have been living in COVID-19 of being isolated is the fact and their truth, when it is not. So from a church's perspective, it's about being able to reach out to people and meeting them where they are, and then having the tools to then provide to them, which, like Pastor Neil said, due to time, you guys can speak to me after. I have a plethora of information and resources. I can provide it to the tech team as well, to then send out to people on Facebook. It can be posted, of just ample resources in every part of Brooklyn, as in Queens and Long Island. But the main thing is, as being a person who knows a person, your support and constant follow-up on someone that you're worried about is very, very powerful. Do not underestimate the power of your presence. Now, if you need tools for yourself, like I said, there's stuff we can definitely provide to you. But when it comes to depression and loneliness, being a contact person is key. And if you can pass that on to other people, that is just a very, very powerful tool that we can use to help other people face their loneliness and depression.
The good news is that we're going to have a part 2 of this. No, because of the overwhelming response on the media, they need a part 2 of this year. They're asking for it. So I'm going to work very quickly, either in April or May. You can put your schedule together because the audience is asking for a part 2 very, very immediately. They're asking. So there will be a part 2 to this issue because this is real. This really happens because as a pastor, I recognize that many of my members have their personality is in the midst of changing because of what have happened to them over the last 2 years. And so I wanted to address it and bring the expert in. Although I have personal knowledge in the area, it's always good to hear from the outside. And we are so proud, Dr. Felipe, thank you for coming so much and being a part of it. We are super proud of our own Sunday school student who became an adult and is able to kind of exercise that kind of wisdom with confidence. We are so proud of you here today. I know Mommy is also proud. She's sitting right here. I'm very proud of her daughter. Let's close out. You can, they're willing to stay a few minutes. You can come and talk to them personally. If you want the information, they're willing to exchange it with you so we can all begin to become healthier. So you don't have to, those on social media have to walk around looking so sad and mad like you've lost the love you had. And so we want to be able to address that. God, we thank you so much for those who have joined us around the world. Thank you for the marvelous knowledge that we have gained today. Thank you for these wonderful presenters and with the ease, with the knowledge that they have been able to transport this information to us. We know we are on a journey and you have given us people with the tool to help us. So help us now to become stronger. And in Christ's name we pray, amen. And thank you for watching around the world. Thank you so much. And for those who are in the audience, a big hand please for our presenters. Thank you. You can come on up now and talk to them personally. Just wear your mask and so forth. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Health Ministry, Christine, for your great work. Thank you so much.